Okay, we are now recording. So bear in mind, because we're now recording, if you turn your camera on, you'll be seen in the recording, and if you turn your microphone on, we'll hear you in the recording. And please bear in mind that the microphones on your computers are very sensitive. I'll make an apology now. I live with a 12-year-old staffy who wanders around sometimes and might appear at some point next to me. She'll probably go to sleep. She snores. So if she comes in and you hear this kind of rumbling sound, that'll be the dog. Okay, so the agenda today is we are going to talk about the assignment for this module. So what's involved in the module project. I'm going to talk a little bit about the way that you should think about your research question, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how to find literature to support you in your research. But to start with, I'm going to give you a simple overview of project. Lots of you will already have looked at my short video, which explains how project works. If you've not looked at that yet, that's absolutely fine, but you can access it by going to the Moodle site. I think it's important to mention at this point that Moodle is going to be the platform through which all of the materials are available to you. So if you want to look at any of the materials associated with this module project, access those materials through the project site on Moodle. So that's your main port of call. All of the live sessions, so all of the lectures, all of the sessions such as the session today, will take place through Teams and will take place in the project team. So you would follow the same link that you followed today to access the project team, and then for each live session, I'll give it a very clear title so that you can see that you're joining the correct session. So today's session was labeled session 1, what is educational research. The next session will be labeled session 2. The next session will be labeled session 3, etc., etc. So click on the link to the session, and that will take you into the correct meeting, and it'll be similar to what's happening here today. Through Moodle, through the announcements on Moodle, I can communicate with all of the students who are on the project module. That's the way that I will communicate with you as a group. So if I put an announcement on the Moodle site, it will appear in your LSBU email account as an announcement from the project Moodle site. I will only put stuff in there that's relevant. You will only access that information if you are regularly accessing your LSBU email account. So a plea here, please, if you've not sorted out your LSBU email account yet, do so. And I strongly recommend that you sort out your phone or your whatever your main point of mobile communication is, so that you pick up both your personal emails. So I guess you've probably got a Hotmail account or a Gmail account or a Yahoo account or one of those things, and make sure that your phone also picks up your LSBU emails. So let me just give you an example of what that looks like in practice. So if I go into my account, let me show you that there. So this is my mobile phone. Oh, that's not going to work, is it? Okay, there's my mobile phone. Let me switch off my background for a moment to make it a little bit easier to show you what that looks like. Hang on, give me a moment. Apply background effects, take off, apply. Right, this is me in the real world now. Okay, here's my mobile phone, and you can see there on my, I know it's inverted, I think you might have it back to front, but you'll know what I mean here. So I've got different accounts on my phone. I've got my Gmail account. I've also got my LSBU Outlook account, and I've got another account with another university. So it's all on the same phone, and I can move between different accounts really easily and find my LSBU emails really easily. They drop into my main account. I get an alert on my phone. I can answer any queries very quickly. Right, I'm going to put my background on again. I'm going to have a different background now. I've had enough of that one. I'm going to move into a different sort of space. This looks rather nice. Okay, so set up your phone so it works for you in that way. If you want some advice, you can sort this out with support from IT, and I'll see if I can find some information about putting various email accounts onto your phone, but it's pretty intuitive, I would say. So do a little bit of experimenting with it. Okay, that's the first thing. Now I'm going to try and share my screen with you. That's the next challenge. So I'm going to go into my there we go. So I'm now sharing with you my Moodle site screen. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how Moodle stores the information and what things that you can find when you go on to Moodle. Sarah Jackson-Stevens, can you just let me know, can you see the Moodle site clearly?
Yes, I can see it perfectly. Thank you, Andrew.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sarah. So this is the home page of your project Moodle site. You've got the welcome there, and you've got these various sections. Now, there's a couple of things with the new Moodle. It's slightly different for those of you who are in the third year, who've been with us already for 2 years, it's slightly different from the old Moodle. You've got this box up here, which basically takes away your content section. So I can click on that, that's gone. And it's open again. Gone. Open. That's quite useful because it means you can click quickly from one section to another. This is my site, so there are some things here which you won't have access to, and some things which I can hide from you. So I've hidden some stuff deliberately, and I don't think you have things like participants or grades. There's the welcome. So if I go into general module information, if you go there, you've got the module guide there. The module guide is presented as a Moodle book. I did it that way because I think it makes it a little bit more mobile friendly. You can click into that and you can just shuffle through the different sections. There's little contents there, module contact, communication, etc., etc. There's a little arrow here, which means you can move from page to page. There's me. There's some information about communicating with the academic team, etc., etc. So that's general module information is there. The section I'm going to point out to you now, which I think is very useful, is the assessment and feedback section here. So if you go into assessment and feedback, this is what I want to start off by talking about with you today. So there are two elements for the assessment of this module. The first element is a proposal, and you are going to submit that proposal in January 2021. So we're now in September 2020. Okay, so you've got all of October, all of November, and all of December, and half of January to get your head around sorting out that proposal. And in that proposal, what you're going to say is going to be in the form of a viva, which is a kind of interview, a conversation between you and your project supervisor. So each one of you will have an allocated supervisor for your dissertation. So that's an academic, one of the team at LSBU who will work with you and support you on developing your dissertation, your project. And in January, on the 14th of January, you will have a one-to-one meeting with your project supervisor, and you will talk about your proposal. So you'll talk about what you're going to do your research into, what you're looking at, what you're trying to find out. You'll talk a little bit about the literature that you have identified that relates to your particular focus. And you are going to talk about your methodology. That is how you are going to carry out your research. So 3 main things. What's your focus? What's your research question? What literature you have found that will support you in developing your expertise in this area? And finally, what methods are you going to do to carry out your research? And you're going to propose that through this conversation called a viva with your dissertation supervisor in January. And that viva forms part of your overall mark for this module. That's the first element. And the second element is the dissertation. And the dissertation is the report, the written report that you are going to do. And the written report is about what was the question that you were researching, what's the literature that you have accessed, what's the methodology, the methods, the research methods that you've used to investigate the question, and what did you find out? And you present all of that stuff as a single report called a dissertation. And the hand-in for that dissertation is in May 2021. So we're now in September 2020. So you've basically got October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. You've got 8 months to identify your question, do some reading, lots of reading, carry out some research and write your report. Now, 8 months sounds a really long time, and I'm going to flag this up with you now because I've been leading this module for since 2016. So this is my 4th time of leading this module. 16, 17, 18, 19, 5th time of reading this module. And I talk about this every year and say, well, that's quite a long way away. May's a long way away, plenty of time. But what I recommend at this point is that you start thinking about your research now. And in live lectures, because this is the first time we've done this online, in lecture theatres, I look around the lecture theatre and all of the students nod absolutely confidently. Yes, absolutely, Andrew, we're going to start doing our research now. And every year I get some sort of panicked emails round about the middle of April saying, look, Andrew, I've not got around to starting my research. Is it too late? And honestly, the answer is yes, it is too late. You need to start thinking now about what you're going to carry out your research into. And I'll talk about how you might think about that now. And you need to aim to start your practical research at some time between now and probably about the end of January. So if you've kind of got your research, the practical research element of your dissertation sorted out by the end of January, you're absolutely fine. In this section, let me just also mention this thing here, the 7,500 words. Now, I know that 7,500 words will concern some of you. It's important to understand that project is a double module, so it carries 40 credits rather than 20 credits, which most of your other modules are 20 credit modules. This is a double module, 40 credits, and actually the word count is roughly double what a 20 credit module would carry. So it's basically, it's 2 long assignments stuck together. So it's not huge, it's not impossible. It carries more weight than anything else that you will do during this year. So it's important to understand that it's a longer piece of work. There are some other documents that you could start to look at now in this section. There's a plan for the viva. So remember, the viva is the presentation that you're going to do to your supervisor in January. And there's a plan there that you can have a look at to give you an idea about the content of that meeting. There's some marking criteria for that meeting. I've hidden this at the moment, the ethical procedures. I'm going to come back to that later. Ethical guidelines are important for you to understand. This is a link to the guidance from BERA from 2018. And this document is the one that I would really encourage you to use as your key guidance for this module. So I'm just going to click into that. There we go. Sarah, is that still clear to everyone?
Yes, that is clear. And Andrew, there is just one question that is hanging on from a student to say, when do they find out about their tutor or supervisor?
Okay, I'll come back to that in a moment. Thanks, Sarah, that's great.
I'll let you know.
Thank you. So this is a really important document here. This is an overview of your dissertation. There are no tricks with dissertation. This is the structure that you're going to use. So you don't need to go away now and try and find some guidance on a template for your dissertation. This is the template for your dissertation. You're going to have a title. You're going to present an abstract. I'll talk about that later. It's not important now. The main sections of your dissertation are going to be an introduction of roughly 600 words. Note here the indicative word count. This is indicative. If your introduction is 500 words long, that's not a problem. If your introduction is 700 words, that's not a problem. These are approximations to give you an idea about how much to put into each section. They're not strict word counts, they are indicative word counts. You're going to have a literature review of approximately 2,000 words. So already you see that the literature review is a really important part. It's nearly a third of your dissertation. You've got a chunk called methodology, which is 1,000 words. So all of these different elements in a chapter called methodology will take up 1,000 words. And then you've got your results and discussion section, 3,000 words. So almost half of your dissertation will be results and discussion, with a conclusion of about 500 words. As with all of your assignments, references are not included in the word count. Okay, so that's an overview of your dissertation. So you're going to have a chapter, you're going to have a title, you're going to have a thing called an abstract. I'll talk about that later on. It's not important now. You're going to have a chapter called introduction, a chapter called literature review, a chapter called methodology, a chapter called research and results and discussion, a short chapter called conclusion, and then a references list at the end. So that is the structure of your dissertation. You don't need to go away and try and find another structure to use for your dissertation. Right, I'll come back to the discussion now, and let me come back here, stop sharing my screen. And okay, so thanks, Nicole. It's a great question. So supervisors, we are just finalising because of particularly those of you who've joined this year. So very warm welcome to all of you on the top up. Because we get your names quite late, we're just finalising supervisor arrangements, and I intend to release certainly a first draft of supervisors next week. You have a number of scheduled meetings with your supervisor before, at least one meeting before you have your Viva. So there's an opportunity for you already to start discussing the focus of your research before you meet your supervisor for your Viva. Are there any other questions? And I'm going to ask you to ask the questions via the chat. Are there any other questions about the assignment? I know this is right at the very beginning, but is there anything that struck you as particularly unclear, or something you'd like me to kind of repeat or go over again? Sorry, repeat or explain more fully now? Ali.
Andrew, I was just wondering, you know how, in terms of communicating, are we still going to use the Padlet?
Yes, that's a good point, Ali. I will put up a Padlet. It's not there yet, but I'll stick up a Padlet. So those of you who thanks, Ali. Great question. If you put your hand down now, otherwise you kind of remain as a sort of historic hand. Perfect. Thanks a lot. Those of you who were on, so if you did Barrister Learning or Introduction to Technology and Education last year, you know that I use a Padlet as a way of students asking questions, and then I can answer the questions. So I will put up a Padlet. A Padlet is a very easily accessible notice board, and I'll invite you to ask any questions you have, and I'll answer those through the Padlet. So we'll operate that as we did last year. Aisha, what days will our scheduled meetings be with our supervisor? So if you are on the work-based route, so if you're on the education studies work-based route or on the top up, your scheduled meetings will be on a Thursday, because Thursday is your day. If you are on the non-work-based route, most of them are on Thursdays, but they might be on Tuesdays because you've also got some timetabled sessions on Tuesdays on a non-work-based route. And I mean, we're not really certain about what's happening with coronavirus and social distancing and all this kind of stuff. At the moment, I'm expecting that meetings with supervisors will be online using Teams. So we'll use this, so there will be no need to come into a live meeting with your supervisor. It will happen through Teams, much as this session is happening today. Of course, your meetings will be one-to-one, so you won't be communicating through chat. You'll be communicating through a conversation. Yeah. So Aisha, so your session will be on a Thursday. Yes. Can we base our research on a previous module? Yeah, absolutely. So if you have, if you've been studying on the work-based or the non-work-based route, and something that you have looked at in a previous module has really tweaked your interest, so for example, something to do with barriers to learning, or something to do with the use of technology, or something to do with an element of psychology that you've looked at before that really interests you, you could look into that area at significantly greater depth. That's the key point. So if it's interested you and you want to look at it some more, remember that we're now thinking about level 6, so that the bar is raised. Your reading needs to be significantly more substantial, and you will be researching something. So it's important here that your research involves some practical research with either learners or teachers, people involved in educational settings. Okay, so we've got a few. I thought that might prompt some questions. Excellent. Right, I'm going to hit Claudia's question first. How long will the lesson recording stay on Moodle? So what I'll do, what I'm planning to do, Claudia, after this session is download the recording of this session, possibly edit it slightly, so take out any kind of dull bits at the end, because there'll be lots of kind of goodbyes at the end. And then I'm expecting to load it up either onto Panopto or onto YouTube, and then it'll be permanent, and then you can access that at any time. I'll put it on Moodle. How do we? Oh, sorry. What happens here? I'll tell you what happens here, folks, just so you'll understand my brief pauses here. So if lots of people ask a question, which is great, bring them on, please. I like a good load of questions. That's great. It obscures, I can't see what the previous question is, so I just have to work my way through those. So how do we do live research as we can't enter places of education? Absolutely. This was a challenge last year. We have all sorts of other mechanisms, such as Teams. So you could do your live research if your participants were teachers, for example. You could use Teams as a way of meeting teachers live and having discussions with them. You could potentially send pupil participants questionnaires or surveys. You could potentially send teacher participants questionnaires or surveys, either closed or open-ended surveys. So there are lots of ways of using online mechanisms for carrying out your research. The one thing that might be difficult is doing live observation, because obviously, because of restrictions around COVID, you might not be able to go into the classroom. But I have to be really clear about this. Live observations are a really tricky thing to use for this kind of research. I think what I'll emphasise particularly next week is how exploring people's perceptions of what is going on is a really fruitful avenue for you with your research. It's a really helpful way for you to research how your research question. Will we need to submit research data with the dissertation? You will carry out your research. I would suggest that your research data is embedded in your dissertation. So when you present your results and your discussion, you'll present your findings as part of the dissertation itself. What would be your advice on finding a question, as my work setting at the moment is a little difficult in terms of research method, as I teach in a prison, so a questionnaire type wouldn't really be possible? Well, it's kind of, I guess then it's about thinking, Aisha, about what would work. So that kind of, I'm kind of going to bounce that back to you a little bit. So if you have decided, so if your workplace is a prison, and you're teaching in a prison, and there's something about, and you're not getting that access at the moment, then is there another way that you could carry out your research without, if you like, the kind of the live access to the prison that you currently have? So is there another way? Can you reframe your question in a way that would work given the restrictions that are there at the moment? It's about kind of thinking a little bit laterally. So you have to think differently about what you're doing, and find a way to find that solution. I've just got the dogs just coming in, so excuse me, I'm just going to turn my speaker off for a moment and just deal with the dog. Just one moment. Sorry about that. Dog sorted. Right. Okay. So we had those two questions there. It's about thinking a bit more laterally about your question. It's an obstacle. You're absolutely right. So getting into the workplace in a practical way is an obstacle. But what's different this year from what we had last year was last year students had already planned their research, and then we got hit by COVID, and then it was an obstacle because they'd thought about their research differently, and then COVID became an obstacle. We've got COVID now, not, I hope, not literally, but you know what I mean. We're dealing with COVID now, and we have to plan differently around our research. So we know that accessing educational settings is either going to be very difficult or is just going to be a no-no. Let's accept that. That's how it's going to work. So right from the very beginning, we need to think differently about the type of research methods that we're going to use. Can we use questionnaires that have been previously created along with giving credit to those who used it first? Well, you can use previous research, and you would refer to previous research in your literature review. That's the answer to that question. So yeah, but you would also, as part of your fresh research, your original research, you would send new questionnaires to gather new data for your research. But yeah, so using questionnaires that have previously been created is about literature, is about using previous research, and that's absolutely fine. Aisha, I can't go online due to safeguarding, so access for me is no. So what are the options? Well, I think it sounds to me that that's going to be a conversation that we can have offline here and think about some different solutions, Aisha. There is always a solution. It might be that you have to think about if it's absolutely not possible for you to carry out research in your workplace, then you may need to carry out your research elsewhere, but let's have that conversation offline. Okay, so I've talked about the assignment. I've started to talk about the research question. Hang on, I'm going to pick up one more. I'm going to answer Georgia's question, and then I'm going to move on to my next thing. So Georgia, to clarify my understanding, we research a particular topic, correct? Finding academic readings which discuss the topic, yes. Then look into our question through researching via questionnaires and interviews. Yeah, that makes good sense to me. Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. So you are going to identify a particular topic, your focus question. So if you like, let's just say, for example, that your particular topic was, for the sake of argument, let's say your particular topic was geography teaching in primary schools. So nobody in the room here with me now needs to do geography teaching in primary schools. This is just an example. So let's say, just as an example, you are interested in geography teaching. Okay, that would be your topic, but that's not your question. So your question would be something like, how do year 4 boys feel about geography? That's your question. So your topic is the broad area that you're looking into. The question is a question. How do these people feel about this thing, for example? Then you're going to look at some academic readings around geography and academic readings around boys and how they feel about subjects in general, maybe including geography. That's your academic reading. And then you're going to carry out your research by, for example, interviewing or surveying year 4 boys. And then you're going to discuss what you found out from your surveys or your interviews in your discussion section. George, does that make sense? Great, that's good. Okay, I am going to go back to sharing my screen again. Oh. Cool, right, I'm sharing my screen again. I'm going to go into the Moodle site again. So I'm back in Moodle again. Now, there were a couple of, I've talked about the assessment and feedback section where you got all of that useful information for you there. If you go into the material for this week, there's an introductory video there about project. So if you've not looked at it yet, I would recommend you look at it. It's not very long. It's just me nattering about project and giving you, probably saying similar things to which I've already said, about which I've already said. There is a Moodle book here about educational research. I suggest you make your way through that Moodle book. It won't take you very long. It asks you some interesting questions to think about. The content of the Moodle book is also the content of that PowerPoint presentation. So you could look at both of those. It's the same thing. If you're more comfortable with the Moodle book, have a look at that. The Moodle book should be more mobile friendly. That's why I stuck it into a Moodle book. It's very easy to kind of swipe from page to page on a mobile phone, for example. The PowerPoint is a little bit more clunky. There are 2 links there to journal articles. I recommend you look at one or both of those journal articles. The reason why I chose those 2, they're both about PE. That doesn't mean you need to do your research about PE. That's not the implication at all. You can choose your research area. That's absolutely up to you, something that you are interested in. That's important. The reason why I chose these two articles is that they are both very, very clearly about perceptions and attitudes. So the first one there, the Coulter one, is called PE should be an integral part of each school day, parents and their children's attitudes towards primary physical education. So you can see already, I think, from that title, that that is a piece of research which didn't involve going into schools to watch PE lessons. That was a piece of research that involved talking to parents and children about how they felt about PE. So this is, I think, the sort of way that we will need to think about our research this year. It's not going to be about observing practical educational activities happening in the classroom. It's going to be about talking to people online or through online surveys or through email correspondence with stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, I mean parents, teachers, children, school leaders, etc., etc. Engaging with them, finding out what their views are about the thing that you want to carry out your research into. Similarly, with this journal article here, Everly and McFadden, I like playing on my trampoline, it makes me feel alive, valuing physical activity perceptions and meanings for children and implications for primary schools. So in this case, Everly and McFadden talked with children about how they felt about PE. Now, Everly and McFadden went into school and talked to children, but it's possible that you could do your, if you were doing something like that, you could do your research by corresponding with pupils or sending them surveys that they could complete. Obviously, we've got issues around social distancing, so you're probably, unless you are actually working currently in an educational setting, you're not going to be able to go into a setting to talk face-to-face to children. So you might need to think more creatively about how you can get hold of their views if that's the way that you want to take your research. So those were the some of the activities I was suggesting that you would do before this session. If you've not looked at that stuff now, that's not a problem, but have a look at that now. And I would recommend having a look at one of these journal articles to get a sense of how your research can be not about observing in the classroom, but more about talking to the participants of in education, teachers, parents, pupils, leaders, etc., etc. Okay, I'm going to come back to the main screen. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so just a little pause there. I'll open that up to questions. So again, the emphasis there, not on observation, because I recognise that that is going to be a barrier for many of you. It's possible some of you on the work-based or on a work-based route are still going into educational settings on a regular basis. It's just part of your work, and you're going in there and you're masked up, etc., etc. Because obviously the government line at the moment is that schools should be open. So it's quite possible that some of you are going into school on a regular basis and are regularly engaging in the real world with teachers, with pupils, with students, etc., etc. And it's no reason why you shouldn't be able to carry out the types of research that I'm talking about in a practical way, in a face-to-face, real world way. Many of us will not be able to get that access to educational settings, so we're going to have to be a little bit more creative about how we engage with participants. And it might be that we have to slightly change or adapt our thinking and adapt what we thought we might do in terms of research to fit in with the restrictions of COVID-19. Somebody's got their mic off. Can you just double check? Somebody's shuffling things around on a table or something. If you could just switch off your mic, that would be great. The snoring noise, that's the dog. The dog's now settled down and is beside me, so that's not me making that snoring noise, that's the dog. Okay, any thoughts about that? The kind of idea of perceptions, exploring stakeholders' perceptions. Does that make sense? Great. Good. Thank you. And that's great. That's really helpful for me. And what you could do, let me just go back to that screen I was sharing before. You'll see, that's what I want to share. So the title of those two journal articles there gives you a bit of a hint about what your dissertation title might look like. So somewhere in your dissertation title, you might use the phrase children's attitudes, or parents' attitudes, or parents and children's attitudes. So if you're talking to parents and children about how they feel about something, the title of your dissertation could include the phrase parents and children's attitudes about, or parents and their children's feelings about, or parents and children's perceptions of. So think about how you might frame the research that you're considering in the title that you choose for your dissertation. Okay, now one of the things, let me stop sharing my screen. One of the things that first presentation talks about is the idea of us as students of the social sciences not being able to carry out the kind of scientific research that perhaps we associate with the word research. I mean, when we think about research, sometimes we think about kind of scientists, you know, pouring chemicals into a test tube and shaking it about and seeing what happens. We can't do that kind of research because we are researching with people. We are social scientists. Education is one of the social sciences. So we're not looking at trying to measure things precisely. We can't do that in the field of education. Any of you that have worked in schools, you know that you can do something on one day and it kind of works kind of pretty well, and you can do the same thing on another day and it just is a disaster. So the kind of the precision that you might find in a subject like chemistry or biology or physics or astrophysics doesn't exist in education. In education, what we're dealing with is much more uncertainty. We can't be certain about our findings, and we certainly can't be precise in our findings. But what we can do is discuss and reflect on the kind of information we get back from participants. So this is a much more cautious, careful way of thinking about the process of research. A couple of questions there. I'm going to pick them up and then I'm going to move on. Megan, I'm assuming our supervisors will point us in the right direction in terms of literature that might be useful for our chosen topic and developing our research methodology. I'm going to talk about literature now. Georgia, once we have an idea of a question, are we able to ask you if we're on the right path, or do we have to wait until we are assigned a supervisor? Well, what you could do is you could ask me immediately after this session. So when we stop this session, I'm expecting to finish the kind of main live feed. I don't know. Give me a little bit more time. I might see if anyone fancies a brief break in a moment, but then I want to talk in the next section on finding literature, and then there'll be a bit of space then. So Georgia, if you wanted to ask me about, you've got an idea, then you could. There's no reason why you shouldn't do that before 12 o'clock today, or we've got another session next week, so before or after the session next week. But then I would encourage you to work and discuss specifically with your supervisor. How are you all feeling? Would you appreciate a sort of short, like a 5-minute break now? Stretch your legs, get a cup of coffee, or would you like to plow on? I'm going to take the first 5 answers. So we've got, I've got a yes, please. I'm assuming that's a yes, please 5-minute break. Okay, right, thank you. I've got 5 answers. Stop. Okay, so the majority at the moment is, okay, the first few, continue please, and then a bit of an expletive there, break please. I'm going to make a very short break in that case, because I think there's a bit of a mixed response there, but I think in spirit, I won't do it for, it's 10:54 now. I am going to stop for 5 minutes and come back at 11 on the dot. So be back here on 11 at the dot, and I will talk then about accessing research and finding journal articles. So you've got 6 minutes to stretch your legs, and I'll start again at 11 o'clock. I think I'll aim to do the next section in about 15 minutes, and that will leave us time at the end for anyone that wants to ask me questions to, for example, discuss their ideas, etc., etc. So we're stopping now, 6 minutes. We're back again at 11 o'clock on the dot. Okay. I'd like to talk now about, let's talk broadly about focusing your research. So it's likely, or it's a possibility, that you already have a broad area that you are particularly interested in. So at this point, I would expect you to be thinking, okay, this is something I'm really quite fascinated by. Let's say, for example, early years. It might be that you are an early years practitioner, you work in a nursery or reception class, or you've had a placement in a nursery or reception class, maybe during your AES placement during your second year of your education studies course, or you work regularly in an early years setting and you're really interested by early years practice, and you would like to find out more about something. So early years is a huge area. There's lots of different things happening in early years. So you've got to focus your research more sharply. Carrying out research into children's experience of, or children's attitudes, or children's perceptions of the early years environment is too broad. So you need to think now about, okay, well, is there a particular subject, a particular part of the curriculum in early years that I'm more interested in? Am I interested in outdoor play, or what happens in the classroom? Am I more interested in what boys do or what girls do? Am I interested in the use of construction in earlier settings? Am I interested in phonics teaching in early, etc., etc.? Your interest might be something to do with special educational needs. Special educational needs is a huge area. How could you sharpen that interest a little bit more tightly? You know, is there a particular special educational need that you are, a particular disability that you are particularly interested in finding more out about? So, for example, are you particularly interested in dyslexia or autism or cerebral palsy? Is there something in particular that feels relevant to you that you need to find this information out, or it might be something that you are particularly engaged with, fascinated by? It might be that you work in adult education, so you might want to think about, okay, within this vast field of adult education, is there something in particular that you would like to develop a particular understanding of? For example, do you work with adults who have learned English as a second language? Would you like to find out more about supporting those adults? Is it that are you working in a field in adult education to do with Car mechanics. Do you want to find out more about how students on a car mechanics course develop their subject knowledge or their confidence with tools or whatever? So first of all, you need to find this broad topic, and then you need to think about how are you going to focus that on something which is manageable for you as a researcher, that you will be able to accomplish within this relatively short time span. So I've talked about this long journey to May when you're handing in your dissertation, but you've got to carry out the research, you've got to do the reading, you've got to write it all up in that time frame. So think about how reasonable, how realistic you will need to be in order to get all of this stuff done in this time frame. A couple of things to think about. You do not need to go to lots of different schools to carry out your research. Your research in one setting is absolutely sufficient. Within one setting, you don't have to go to lots of different classrooms to carry out your research. One classroom or the students or pupils in one classroom is plenty. COVID is presenting us with difficulties. It's not going to be possible for all of you to go into schools. I've already acknowledged that. So how could you focus your research in a way that is going to be manageable for you? Have you got a network which you could use in order to get some feedback about, I don't know, parents' views, pupils' views, etc., teachers' views? So think about what's practical. Think about your main area of focus. Think about how you can sharpen this more precisely. A question from Aisha there, what area of the dissertation do we need to focus on to get the most highest grade? Well, the two big chunks, the two main sections are the literature review. So a range of literature that covers your particular focus, and your results and discussion section. That's the other big chunk of it. So almost half of the literature of the dissertation is made up of your results, discussion and conclusion section. So they have to be really strong for you to do well with your dissertation. You've also got to have a strong methodology section and a strong rational introduction to your dissertation. So dare I say it, Aisha, you need to focus on all elements of your dissertation to get the highest grade. It's not a module where there are shortcuts, I have to be honest. It's not that you can do some bits of it really well and some bits of it adequately if you're going for the highest grade. Okay, I want to go back to looking for literature now. So I'm going to just share my screen with you. I'm going to go back into Moodle. So I'm back where I was before. This is week 1. Okay, I've shown you these things already. There's the video. That's the stuff that you could have a look at. There's those 2 articles, the links to the 2 articles. That's the plan to the Viva. I talked about that briefly earlier on about the Viva. That's the meeting that's going to occur in January. There's the dissertation structure. Remember, that's the document that's got all of the different elements that you're going to have in your dissertation. And I just want to take you here. So this link is a link directly into the Education Journal database. So you're going to need to start to read and read some more. So here's a link to that. So I'm now in the Education Journal database. So this is London South Bank Library. And within the library, there is a specific area for students who are studying education courses. So this is your database. If you, for some reason, lose the link, there's no reason why you should lose that link because it's embedded in Moodle, but you could always just go onto Google and search LSBU Library Education and you'll end up here as well. So I'm not going to do any chatting now. I don't want to get confused by that. Let me get rid of that there. No thanks. Okay. So I'm in the search here now. The best thing for you to do once you get to this page is you go here, Education Research Complete. There's a hint there. It says best bet, and it says best bet for a good reason. It's just a really good place to research or to search for journal articles if you're looking at research into education. So I'm going to click on there. Now, I'm already logged into my LSBU account. You can access this in the same way that I'm at home. I'm accessing my LSBU account from home and I've logged in. You can do exactly the same thing from your home. But at this point, so when I'm clicking here, I'm taken to this search site. At some point, you will need to log into your account to get to this point, and you use the same account details that you would use for anything else you're doing at LSBU. So it's your LSBU name and your password. So how do you search for journal articles? Okay, here we go. It's pretty straightforward.
Andrew.
So, yes.
Sorry, Sarah, just to, one of the students, Adam, is not able to see what is coming up. I'm not sure if you can suggest anything, because I don't know, because I can see it. It may be running slow, that's all. I'm not sure.
It might just simply be because of a kind of bandwidth issue or a speed of internet connection, Adam. I'm not sure why that is, but what we can do is we can always find a time to kind of run through this again, and I am recording this. So I'm hoping it's going to be possible for you to see this retrospectively. Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so I'm into the search mechanism now. So let's do some research. I'm going to do some research into early years. So I'm going to type in early years, and you'll see as soon as you type into it, you get lots of choices here. It sort of helps you fill in things. So I'm going to just go for early years. There we go. That's not doing that for me. Let's just go early years. Okay, done that. So early years. Now, early years is a bit too broad, so I want to find out something specifically about early years and mathematics. That's an area that's close to Sarah's heart. So I've got early years, I've got mathematics.
Thanks, Andrew.
It's okay. So early years mathematics. Okay, now here's some more things to think about. I'm just scrolling down here very slowly. So there's my search. Now, the problem with this is it will search everything on the database where these things crop up. I would like, let's see if I want to look at the title. So I'm going to put in title there, and I'm going to select title there. So I'm looking for a journal article, and the title is going to include the words early years and mathematics. I want a full text linked. Now, why I want this is because I don't want to waste my time trying to find journal articles which I then cannot access. That's just really frustrating. I want to find a journal article which I can access like a PDF straight away without doing anything more fussy. So I've got my linked full text there. I think that's probably going to do me for now. Let's see what happens with that. So I've got early years mathematics. I've got linked full text. I'm going to go for it. Search. Here we go. Oh, nice. Okay, so I've got 32 hits. So 32 journal articles, just like that. I'm not paying for any of this. These are all freebies. Okay, whatever you do, don't pay for a journal article. You'll come across them. They're incredibly expensive. And it's much simpler for you to go to the LSBU search engine and do it like this. So I've got some stuff here about emotional relationships with maths in the early years. Fascinating. There's my document there. There's another one here about parents' involvement in early years mathematics. There's a thing here about Japanese immigrant parents. You'll see already that some of these might not be relevant to you, and that's the ones you can kind of get rid of. You can kind of ignore those. Mathematics in early years students, relationship, etc., etc. And you can see all of these have got PDFs. So I can access these really simply. Okay. That makes sense to everyone? Very straightforward. The other little trick here, which is a new one I found out quite recently, is I can save these. So if I go, let's say I like that one particularly, so I'm going to save that. Do you see the little save box there? I'm saving that one. You're going to like this if I can remember how to do it. And let's see, let's save that one. Okay, so I've saved those two. Now I've got these two in my folder. Can you see those two I've saved here? And then I can go to folder view. They are there. Now, what's really brilliant here is I can then email. There we go. Email from, and I can send them to me. So I can put my email address in there, and it's going to send me those two PDFs. How cool is that? It's really straightforward, really quick way of finding stuff that's relevant and building up a range of literature to back up your literature review. Let me just stop share. Yes, we would expect you to have the use of literature in your of journal articles in your literature review. So I've just seen there's only 2 people that can't access that. We are recording this, so I'm hoping that that will be clear in the recording to those of you that haven't seen it. I haven't seen anybody else saying they're not seeing it. Can I just do? Oh, it's a bit delayed. Thanks, George. It might be a little bit of delay, but you're getting an idea there. Ah, yes, but Georgia can see it. Great. So I am recording this, and I can send that around. Would somebody like to suggest another area that I could do a little bit of researching into and find some journal articles? Homeschooling, excellent. Got one. Ali, you're too slow then. I'm sorry. I'm going to go for homeschooling. So I'm going back in here again. Okay, I'm going back to best bet. All right. I'm going to go into homeschooling. There's a link there. Okay, homeschooling. Let's say I'm particularly interested in, should we try mathematics as well? Because I want to narrow it down a little bit. Homeschooling, mathematics. Remember, I'm going to go to linked full text. Search. Now, what I forgot to do then is I forgot to link. So these articles will cover homeschooling. You can see them, they're here. These are issues that are dealt with. But when I did the selection, I didn't do anything here. I didn't put it in the title. So let's just see if it makes a difference if I add this to the title. Title, search. Nothing. So it's in the content, it's in all of the text. Is that making sense to everybody? So if I'd limited it just to the title, that would have been a problem. But actually, when I look at the subjects covered by these particular journal articles, there's quite a lot of, I mean, there's loads of stuff there, isn't there? In that one particularly, it actually that does appear in the title. They don't always appear in the title. I've gone for all text there. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, Sarah, I'll put a brief guide to that with each step on a PowerPoint or something to run through that. And what I might do actually, Sarah, what would be easier is if I'll do a video, a kind of screen capture video of what it's like for me when I go through that process, and I'll share that with you. Aisha, what if Aisha? what if the area we have chosen does not have much literature? Would we need to change our focus completely, or would there always be literature on all areas? No, there isn't always literature on all areas. Your area might be very specific and not have any literature on it, which is why before you absolutely determine on your research area, you need to have a look to see if the literature is already available. So start to do something like what I've just gone through here to see what's available. And if there's nothing there, and you do a proper search, if you can't find anything, you may need to adapt your focus to fit in with the available literature. Yeah, Misha, what I'll do is I will, in my screen capture, I'll put it together and I'll include what I did to email the things to myself. Ali.
Andrew, I'm just wondering, does our literature only have to be limited to the UK, or can we include other countries as well?
Okay, good question. So the literature could relate to practice in other countries, but what you've got to think about is the question that you're asking. So if your question is about the practice, early years practice in a particular setting, then perhaps the research that's been done in Japan or Finland or Russia isn't particularly relevant to the research you have looked at in Southwark or Lambeth. So it's important that you acknowledge that there may be differences in practice in other countries, and that the relevance of that research from Finland and the other countries I mentioned, which I've now forgotten, they might not be so relevant to the research you're doing. It doesn't stop you referring to research from other countries, but you need to be thoughtful, cautious about the way that you present the relevance of that research from other countries. Ali, okay?
Thank you, Andrew.
Cool, thanks. I think I've picked up all those suggestions there. I think there was one. Caprice, is that what you were asking, or is it a different thing? Were you actually looking at education in other countries and continents?
Oh no, I was thinking rather broad. I was thinking rather broad. What do you call it? Topic as well about how the pandemic affects education. And during this time, my dad also got a private tutor online from India for my little brother. So I was just asking with regards to that, because I know it's education.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So it might be what you might explore is kind of differences in approaches in different countries, and that might be relevant for you to draw on the research that's carried out in India or in other countries. That would make a lot of sense. Umar, could I talk about the current COVID situation affecting the primary? Yes, absolutely. Why not? No, anything that you think is relevant, that's important. Anything that is meaningful to you is relevant. So you could look at, for example, pupils or parents or teachers' views around the impact of COVID. Absolutely. But what you might need to do is focus that more strongly and find previously published research about, some aspect of the curriculum, and then kind of compare that with the views that teachers are voicing now, given the context of COVID. So it's a little bit of lateral thinking about how you could bring COVID into your research question. There's one last thing I'd like to show you before I stop. I'm just going to go back to my screen again. I think I might still be sharing it actually. No, I'm not. Let me go back here. Let me stop. Sorry, just a moment. Just one moment. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And then I'm going to start sharing it again. And I'm going to go back to